right, here we go with graphing functions. So we've already seen how to do some stuff with tables. We've seen what some graphs look like. So we're going to see today how to actually make these graphs. So this first one here is f of x equal to 2x. Okay. What we're going to do is set up our table. Okay. We have our input x and our output f of x. And remember that f of x is also the same as y. So we're going to put that in here. Okay, should be equal to y, right? So your f of x value is going to go along your y-axis, okay? That's going to be the same as the f of x axis. So we have 2x. So some suggestions for what you should put in for your x values. I would suggest starting like with some negatives and then going to 0 and then going up to the positives. It kind of depends on what your function looks like though, but that's always a good thing to check. So we've got like 5 spaces on our thing, so let's start at like -2. Okay, and I'm just picking those numbers. You can plug in anything you want, but a good section to choose would be like from -2 to +2. That way you get some negatives, some positives, because a lot of times things will switch when you change your input from positive to negative and stuff. So that's just a good place to pick to start. And then our f of x, well, we have 2 times x, so it would be 2 times my x is -2, so then my output would be -4. So then what we do over here to plot that, your x value would be -2, so I would go there, and then -4, so I'd have to come down to -4. So I'd have -2, -4, that would put me here. Okay? And then you just keep going with the same thing. So then let's do like -1. We'd have 2 times -1. That would give us -2. So then we would have -1, -2, which would go right there. And then we'd have 0. 2 times 0 is just going to be 0. So then we would have our point at 0, 0. And then 1, we would have 2 times 1 for our function, which would be 2. So then we would have the point 1, 2. Would be up here. And then our last one be 2. So 2 times 2 would give us +4. So then we would have the point 2, +4. Okay? And then as you can kind of see, it starts to form a line. So then you can kind of start to connect that together. Maybe it would just be easier if I go like this here. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay. And it will keep going in those directions, so that's where you put the arrows on the end to indicate that it's going to keep going. We could take like more inputs, so you could start doing like +3, 4, 5, 6, and keep on going. Same thing over here. You could keep going down the negatives and keep on moving. So that's how we did that one. And again, remember your points from this, your points end up being like you have x, y, right? Which is the same thing as if we did like x and then f of x. So those values give you your points. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. This time we have f of x is equal to x minus 3. So every time we put our input in, we're going to subtract 3 from it. That's what that function is telling us to do. So again, let's just go ahead and start with like -2. You could do anything you want. So you could go like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something like that. Okay, it doesn't have to be the ones I'm picking. Those are just the ones I think are good to pick. But yeah, so then we would have -2 minus 3, which would give us -5. If we plugged in -1, we would have -1 minus 3, which would give us -4. If we plug in 0, we would end up with 0 minus 3 would give us -3. Plug in 1, you'd have 1 minus 3, which would give us -2. And if we plug in 2, we would have 2 minus 3, which would give us -1. Okay, so our points, we have -2, -5. So -2, -5 would go there. -1, -4 would go there. 0, -3 would go there. 1, -2, and then 2, -1. So this one ends up being another line. So then we can go ahead and connect those and draw our arrow again. Maybe, here we go. Okay. If you have any questions about that, make sure you ask before moving on. Well, let's go ahead and move forward to our next page. With number 3, okay, we've got this like fractional function going on, but that's okay, don't be afraid of that. We would have 4 minus x, so we're subtracting our input from 4 first, and then you're going to divide by 2. Okay, remember that fraction bar tells you to divide. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just pick -2 to +2 as my input. So if I pick -2, I would have 4 minus -2, and then divided by 2. 4 minus -2 is going to be 4 plus 2. Remember, subtracting a negative is like adding. Okay, so I would have 6 over 2, which would give me +3. All right, then if I do -1, I have 4 minus -1 over 2. That would be 4 plus 1, so I would have 5 over 2, which would give me 2.5 if I did decimal. So you could leave it as a fraction if you want, whatever floats your boat. If we plug in 0, we would have 4 minus 0 over 2, which is going to leave us with 4 over 2, which would be +2. If I plug in 1, we'd have 4 minus 1 over 2, which would give me 3 over 2, which would be 1.5. And then if I plug in 2, I would have 4 minus 2 divided by 2, which would give me 2 divided by 2, which will simplify to 1. So then to plot all of these, we would have -2, +3. So let's go ahead and plot that. -2, +3. And then I've got -1, 2.5. So that'd go right about there. And then 0, 2 should go there. 1, 1.5. And 2, 1. Okay. So then, again, you can just connect those together. And put your arrows on the end. We've got another line. So basically, if you start to pick up on this, everything that will have like just your regular x in it, doesn't have an x squared or anything weird going on with it, is typically going to be a linear function. It's going to make a line. But like this next one that we're going to look at here, now we've got x squared. So that one's not linear. So that's going to look like something else. You might have seen it before. But yeah, let's go back in and go ahead and do those inputs again of -2 to +2. So starting with -2. Now, when we have x squared, remember you want to square the entire input. So I want to square the negative with the 2. So a negative times a negative is going to go back to a positive, so this will go back to a +4. Same if we plug in -1. -1 squared would be -1 times -1, which will give you +1 as your output. If I plug in 0, and I get 0 squared, 0 times 0 is just still going to give you 0. +1 will be 1 squared, which will give me +1, and then 2 squared will be 4. All right, so what this ends up looking like, we've got -2, +4. It's going to go there. And 1, 1, or I'm sorry, -1, 1. Then 0, 0. Then 1, 1, and 2, +4. All right. So first, before we start to connect these, I'm sure a lot of you will be tempted to connect these just with like straight lines. So being like this and then this. But you want your functions to be kind of as smooth as possible. So if it is a straight line like it was up here, it's all going in the straight line. Like just one smooth connection would be that line. Okay? But coming down here, like this and then this isn't totally smooth. You want it to be more curved. Okay? And that's what it should look like. It should be curvy. Okay? Not angled. So what that kind of looks like is a U shape, and we're going to call that a quadratic function. You will have to learn that later, but it's just good to let you know about it now. Let's go ahead and put that in somewhere. This is a quadratic. You can put little quotations and just remember the name or whatever. And it should be U-shaped. All right, last page for the graphing functions, number 5. We would have this as your absolute value function. Okay, if you don't remember what absolute value means, it's talking about the distance away from 0. So this means the absolute value of x. So whatever you are putting in there, you're thinking about, okay, how many units is that away from 0? So I'll put that in parentheses here, distance from 0. So basically how a lot of people remember it, it should always be positive, like a positive distance. So when I plug in -2 and I do the absolute value of -2, -2 is 2 units away from 0. So that would be just regular 2. When I put in -1 and do the absolute value of -1, -1 is 1 unit away from 0. When I put in 0, the absolute value of 0, well, 0 isn't any units away from 0, so that's just still 0. I put in +1 and do the absolute value of +1. +1 is 1 unit away from 0. Okay, so a lot of people get tripped up and think that it switches the sign. It doesn't do that. It's asking how many units is that number away from 0. So when I put in +2, 2 is 2 units away from 0. So what this one ends up looking like, it's kind of similar to your quadratic, but not quite. We would have our -2, +2, -1, 1, 0, 0. and 2, 2. So then, when you connect these, what you're going to want to do this time, it's not a curve like the other one was. This one has like a V shape to it, okay? And that's going to be because these are going to be connected on this side like a straight line. And then on this side would be like a straight line. And it would keep going up that way. So basically what that absolute value is doing, it's like as you get close to 0, your distance goes down. But then once you get past that and start going back the other way, your distance starts to go farther up. Okay? That's why it kind of has that bounce back effect. All right, our last one down here. We've got 1/2 x plus 1. So we're going to take half of our input and then add 1 to it. Let's go ahead and do something different for our inputs this time, just so you can kind of see a little bit more of what that's like. Let's just do like 0 to 5 or something. Or I guess it would be 0 to 4. So if I plug in 0 and I do 1/2 0 plus 1, well, 1/2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 would just be 1. If I plug in 1, I would have 1/2 times 1, and then plus 1. And then I have 1/2 times 1 is just 1/2, and then plus 1, that would give you 1.5. All right, now if I plug in 2, 1/2 times 2 plus 1. So then I would have 1/2 times 2 is 1, and then plus 1, so I would have 2 as my output. If I plug in 3, have 1/2 times 3 plus 1. You can use your fractions with this. I'm just going to go ahead and do decimals, but 1/2 of 3 would be 1.5, and then plus 1, so I would have a total of 2.5 as my output. And then if I plug in 4 and do half of 4, whoops. There we go. And then plus 1, that would give me 2 plus 1, which would be 3. All right, then we can come over and plot that. So we would have 0, 1, 1, 1.5, 2, 2, 3, 2.5, and then 4, 3. So that one is going to be another line that we're looking at. Okay. All right, well, if you have any other questions about how to handle this kind of stuff, raise your hand, let your teacher know, and they will come over and help you.